Chapter 10, Pearl Harbor. It is Sunday, December 7th, 1941, and the sun is shining in Washington, D.C. To the morning churchgoers, it seems just another bright winter day. At the White House, 31 guests are expected for lunch. There will be guests for dinner, too. None of that is unusual. The White House has become an informal, busy place since the Roosevelts moved in. That was more than 8 years ago. FDR was re-elected in 1936 and again in 1940. No other president has served more than 2 terms. The American people, or most of them anyway, have great faith in their president. These are dangerous times, and alarming things are happening all around the world. It is important to have a leader who can be trusted. Hitler has steamrolled his way to some astounding victories. He has taken Austria and Czechoslovakia and Poland and Denmark and Norway and Holland and Belgium. One by one, he picked off all those countries. The democracies let him do it. The democratic nations are so sick of war that they are willing to do anything to try to avoid it. That is what they have actually done is make the war much worse than it would have been if they had stopped Hitler. It was when the Nazis marched into Poland that Britain and France finally responded. Both nations had pledged their help to Poland if it was attacked. Britain and France went to war. What they faced was something called blitzkrieg. That was the German word for lightning war, which was a good description. The Germans sped their troops, tanks, and artillery across nations, obliterating them almost before they knew what was happening. When superbly trained, well-equipped German forces raced into France, the country was overwhelmed. A large British-French army was trapped at Dunkirk on the English Channel. It looked as if the soldiers were doomed. Then the British government set out an appeal for boats. Soon, fishermen, dentists, grocers, tugboat captains, anyone with a boat that could make it across the channel were sailing back and forth, ferrying soldiers to England. They saved an army, but they couldn't save France. On June 14, 1940, German tanks rolled into Paris. Now, almost the only European democracy left is Britain, and Britain is under attack. German bombers are pounding that small island. It looks as if it will go next. Everyone knows that the Nazis plan to invade England. Hitler's goal is world conquest. Americans have plenty of reason to worry. In Asia, Japan has earlier occupied Manchuria in 1931 and other parts of China in 1937 and had just invaded French Indochina, now Vietnam, Laos, and Kampuchea, in July 1941. Japan is also threatening Thailand, the Philippines, and other Pacific nations. The United States sends letters to Japan objecting to this aggressive behavior and finally imposes a total trade embargo and freezes Japanese funds in U.S. banks. Inside Japan, there is a power struggle between civilian and military leaders. In the summer, Prime Minister Fumimaro Kono offers to meet with Roosevelt. The president doesn't understand the importance of the request. He refuses the meeting. Kono resigns and is replaced by Army Minister Hideki Toho. In Japan, the military is now supreme. This very day, December 7th, Secretary of State Cordell Hull receives a call from 2 Japanese diplomats. They ask for an emergency meeting. Hull expects to be given the Japanese government's answer to an American peace letter. At the White House, after lunch, the president works on his stamp collection. He began collecting stamps as a boy. His good friend, Harry Hopkins, is with him. So is his Scotty dog, Fala. They are relaxing. The phone rings. It is close to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, is on the line. His voice is quivering. A message has just been received from Hawaii. This is what it says. Air raid on Pearl Harbor. This is not a drill. Pearl Harbor in the Hawaiian Islands is where the Pacific Fleet is headquartered. On Sunday morning, ships were lined up in the harbor. Their crews were having breakfast or relaxing or sleeping. At 7:02 a.m. Hawaiian time, a radar operator saw some blips on his screen. The operator didn't pay attention to them. He thought they were bombers he was expecting from the West Coast. By 7:55 a.m., he knew better. That was when the first dive bombers with the red Japanese sun painted on their sides let their bombs loose on Battleship Row. The battleship Arizona gave off a tremendous roar, split in two, and slipped to the bottom of the harbor. That was just the beginning. Almost all the American planes on the island were damaged or destroyed. Most of the warships were crippled or sunk, and about 2,400 soldiers, sailors, and civilians were killed. At 2:05 p.m. Washington time, which is 8:05 Hawaiian time, the Japanese envoys arrive at the Secretary of State Cordell Hull's door. They are part of an elaborate Japanese plan of deception, but their timing is off. Before the secretary can see them, his phone rings. It is the president with the awful news of the Japanese attack. Now, Hull is from Tennessee, and he claims he has a Tennessee temper. The stories of what he says to those envoys will differ, but it is known that they leave quickly with their heads down. Hull is soon at the White House. So are many government military officials. Newspaper reporters begin arriving. At 2:25 p.m., the story goes out on news wires to the American people. The reports from Pearl Harbor are humiliating, but that isn't the only bad news. The same day, the Japanese have attacked American and British bases at Midway, Wake Island, Guam, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the Philippines. It is an astonishing act of aggression, but this president is at his best in a crisis. His advisors are angry, fearful, and frustrated. The president remains calm. He came into office during the nation's worst economic crisis. This is worse. The free world is fighting for survival. Pearl Harbor is a disaster, but it may also be a lucky break. It unites the nation. There are no more isolationists. Everyone joins the war effort. Pearl Harbor shows the damage that air power can do. It changes people's thinking on that subject. The next day, the president goes before Congress. The Japanese have launched an unprovoked and dastardly attack, he says. December 7th is a day which will live in infamy. He asked Congress to declare war on Japan. 3 days later, Japan's allies, Germany and Italy, declare war on the United States. It is World War II. It will make the awful First World War seem like a fire drill. The United States will fight this war against the wolves, maintain its democracy, as it did during the terrible Depression, and remain, as Abraham Lincoln said, the last best hope of earth. Two great leaders speak and inspire. Winston Churchill was an orator who could and did inspire a nation. This is part of what he said to the British people on June 4th, 1940. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender, until in God's good time, the new world, with all its power and might, steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the old. In radio broadcasts called fireside chats, Franklin Delano Roosevelt liked to talk to the American people as if he were a friend sitting in their living room. Usually those chats were filled with humor, but on February 9th, 1942, he didn't have anything funny to say. We are now in this war. We are all in it, all the way. Every single man, woman, and child is a partner in the most tremendous undertaking of our American history. On the road ahead, there lies hard work, grueling work, day and night, every hour and every minute. I was about to add that ahead there lies sacrifice for all of us, but it is not correct to use that word. The United States does not consider it a sacrifice to do all one can to give one's best to our nation, when the nation is fighting for its existence and its future life. We are now in the midst of a war, not for conquest, not for vengeance, but for a world in which this nation and all that nation represents will be safe for our children. We are going to win the war, and we are going to win the peace that follows.